Hi, this is History with me, Dan. In a recent video, I went through the various movie theaters that existed in decades past throughout the city of Hartford, Connecticut. If you haven't seen it, I'll link it in the description below. In that video, I started with 10 movie theaters that existed in downtown Hartford in 1950. They were all built in the 19-teens and 20s. One theater I didn't mention was one that first opened in 1912 but only lasted until 1927. It was located on the south side of Asylum Street between Ann and Ford Streets, across from the Bond Hotel, in what is now a parking lot. What was this forgotten theater that started out as a church? Watch the rest of this video to find out. Let's start with the story of a winter storm. On December 13, 1915, an unexpectedly massive snowstorm hit the northeastern United States. As you would expect, the storm wreaked havoc on the state's rail system. The Hartford Courant newspaper observed on December 14th, quote, "Hartford, the central station between New York and Boston, probably suffered the most. Snow blockades and other complications attributable to the storm were directly responsible. The scene in the trainmaster's office at Union Station for several hours last night must have resembled that in a madhouse. Trouble was reported on every line. The task of undoing the tangle of trains which were stalled or delayed all about the state became so involved that railroad officials did not see any immediate hope for relief." Unquote. Hartford's trolley system was also affected. This trolley car got stuck on Park Street, and its crews stayed with the immobilized car from the night of Monday the 13th until the morning of the 16th. They had to use field plows to break up the snow. As noted in the Courant on December 15th, quote, "that the steam railroads have many advantages for patrons that the trolley companies do not possess was well shown Monday night when the snow seriously embarrassed all transportation facilities, and while many who wanted trolley cars were left out in the cold. As it was, those who went to Union Station to take trains had, even though the trains were late, the advantage of having the new, warm, and roomy station in which to wait. In fact, many who were unable to make their homes slept on settees in the waiting room." Unquote. The newspaper also reported, quote, "about 400 people stalled early yesterday morning in Union Station, impatiently awaiting trains that had stopped running, were agreeably surprised about 2:30 a.m. at an announcement by manager John Glacken of the Empire Theater on Asylum Street. He invited them to come to the theater and see the moving picture show, which had been put on earlier in the evening. Instead of staying all night on the station benches, most of the 400 gratefully accepted the invitation and saw Comrade John, a 5-reel film, and the other features of the regular show." Unquote. So what was the Empire Theater? To answer that, we have to go back to 1860, long before there were any films. In that year, Hartford's First Methodist Episcopal Church was erected on Asylum Street. It was the second of 3 buildings the congregation has built in the city. The first was erected on Trumbull Street in 1820 and was enlarged in 1829. When the church moved to Asylum Street, that original house of worship without its steeple continued to exist until it was torn down in 1916. The Hartford-based architect John C. Mead used the building as his office and woodworking shop from 1879 to 1889. So in 1860, the Methodists moved to Asylum Street, and then, in 1905, to a new church at the corner of Asylum Avenue and South Whitney, which is still their house of worship today. Their old building on Asylum Street continued to stand undisturbed from 1905 until 1911. It was then owned by the Hartford Electric Light Company, which had its Pearl Street power station just to the north. Its smokestack is visible just behind the church in this photograph. In 1911, the front section of the church was torn down to make way for shops, while the rear section remained, remodeled to become a theater. As reported in the Current on April 15, 1911, quote, "Today the entire front and towers have disappeared, while the present front of the building, which is now several feet further back from the sidewalk than the old front was, and which was previously a wooden partition, has been rebuilt into a solid brick wall. This partition will serve well the purpose for which it is designed once the two proposed new stores are erected between this partition and the sidewalk on either side of the central entrance. In the building of this wall, the bricks which had been taken from the front of the old church were utilized." Unquote. This photograph from the 1920s shows the result, with the two stores built in front, and above them the sign for the Empire Theater, which showed the latest moving pictures. As the Hartford Current described the Empire Theater's illuminated sign on March 16, 1912, quote, "It is a framework of a cannon, belching forth shot and smoke, and over it is the word Empire. Tonight the sign will begin to do its duty and will attract hundreds to the new playhouse." Unquote. The Empire Theater was built by Patrick S. McMahon, a theater magnate from New Britain. In that city he owned another theater, as well as the Hotel Bronson, where he resided. Initially, McMahon's brother Edward managed the theater in Hartford. Edward was again the manager in November of 1919, when the Empire arranged a showing of the popular but notoriously racist 1915 film, Birth of a Nation. Mayor Richard J. Kinsella ordered the showing stopped after receiving a request to suppress it by members of his Americanization Committee, who feared the showing would stir up racial tensions. Various stores occupied the front section of the building over the years. At the time of this photograph, it was Lou's Working Man's Store, an Army-Navy store. The Empire Theater was in existence from 1912 until 1927. The story of why it closed is a complicated one, involving building inspections and lawsuits. To explain briefly, after Patrick McMahon passed away in 1923, the theater was owned by the New Britain Trust Company, the trustees of his estate. Through various transfers in 1925, the lease on the theater came to be shared by Patrick's brother Edward J. McMahon and Anna M. Schoen, whose husband Max co-managed the theater with Edward. In 1926, the Hartford building supervisor, Philip A. Mason, deemed that the theater was unsafe in the event of a fire or panic and demanded the owners make changes. This was not the first time the theater had been cited for safety concerns. In 1921, after complaints by city officials, the seating capacity of the Empire was reduced from 1,120 seats to 990. 5 years later, in response to the new complaint in 1926, the owners of the building, the Trust Company, reduced the number of seats again, this time from 990 to 750. They also made other alterations, such as widening the fire escapes. The lessees, Schoen and McMahon, soon ran into a financial shortfall, which they blamed on the loss of revenue due to the reduced seating. After the Trust Company refused their request to reduce the rent by 25%, Schoen and McMahon stopped paying rent, and after 8 weeks were formally evicted from the building. They then filed their own countersuit for damages of $30,000, but in 1928 a Superior Court judge ruled in favor of the New Britain Trust Company. In 1930, the vacated theater would be leased again, but not as a theater, This time it became an indoor golf course called the Country Club. But this closed soon after, and the building was torn down for a parking lot in October of 1931. Before I end this video, I want to read one more story about the Empire Theater. As the Hartford Courant reported on May 2, 1917, quote, "Attracted by shouts from within the Empire Theater on Asylum Street after 11 o'clock last evening, a policeman and citizens investigated, and in tearful sounds from within, learned that a 10-year-old devotee of the movies had fallen asleep during the show and had not been noticed when the place was closed for the night. Policemen from headquarters went to the theater and, entering through a side door, rescued the youngster, who was allowed to go to his home. He explained that he was some frightened when he awoke and found that he was in darkness, and said that he did not know where he was for some time." Unquote. If you want to learn more about Hartford theaters, check out the video on the right, and remember to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.